What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka Just 10 More Minutes, aka the Freaking 10. We are back again with Sabaton history, with one that I truly actually thought about moving to next week simply because today it's now almost 7 a.m. here in the US. And it's Thanksgiving Day, a day of giving thanks. And I knew this one was going to be emotional. I almost moved it to next week just so that it didn't set the tone for my day. But, you know, life isn't about that. Life isn't about just avoiding things. You have to be able to take things head on and just deal with it straightforward. And so I was like, you know what? So many people have shown strength over the years. I'm sitting here fretting about watching a video and, avoiding that, and not really avoiding, but postponing it, because these things do take a toll on me from a emotional standpoint, not necessarily in a bad way, right? Emotions are not bad. You don't run from emotion. But I am an emotional person that does get fully invested in what I'm watching. And so, there's been things that, like Firestorm, that really got me, that I still question to this day, that really upset me. So I know that this one is going to be tough. But at the same time, it is part of history. The story needs to be told. The story needs to be respected. And, with as amazing as Sabaton is with it, the history behind it, I think, is going to make it that much stronger. When I see people like Mia say that she can't do the story justice, I know I'm in for something. She always gives me great information. There's also Melkor and some other ones that really step up and just give fantastic information. Amy, everyone, right? I could go on and on with names, but the warning was very, very clear. And so, if you are sensitive to this and this is the first time at the channel and you haven't watched any of these probably will get emotional. So with that being said, let's switch it up. Let's check it out. All right, just making sure audio and everything looks good. All right, let's do this.
The story of Witold Pilecki is one of the great 20th century stories of bravery and sacrifice.
And our song Inmate 4859 is about the brave man, Witold Pilecki.
The story of Witold Pilecki is as tragic as it is heroic, and it is one for the ages. He was born in the Russian Empire near the Finnish border in 1901, spent his youth as part of the nationalistic Polish Pathfinders, and fought in independent Poland's new army against the Soviets in the Polish-Soviet War. He lived a peaceful life for much of the interwar years, but eventually returned to the Army Reserve, and in 1939 was mobilized against the German invasion. Pilecki's Ulan regiment was shattered by the advancing Wehrmacht, but he joined other Polish stragglers and kept fighting until the fall of Warsaw. In late October, he disappeared into the underground, where he joined the resistance movement of the Tajna Armia Polska, an arm of the Armia Krajowa, the Polish Home Army. Now, one of their tasks was to get inside knowledge about German prisoner of war camps, and one camp in particular in the small town of Oswiecim, Auschwitz in German, where many Poles simply disappeared. It was suspected that they were sent to Germany as forced labor, but no one knew for sure. Pilecki came up with a dangerous plan. He would personally infiltrate Auschwitz, uncover the truth, and organize resistance in the camp. On September 19, 1940, using the alias Tomasz Serafiński, he intentionally walked into a German security sweep on the streets of Warsaw. SS men seized him, and the next day he was herded alongside other Poles into trucks at the Warsaw train station. All day they drove east. The men pressed together without food or water. Now, the rest of this story is told directly from the source material, from Pilecki's personal report about his experiences in the camp. It is not pretty. Arriving at the camp, Puletsky and the crowd of men were driven forward by brutal beatings from the guards. Some men were pulled out of the group at random, unprovoked, and shot in the head to break any thoughts of resistance. Accompanied by the laughter of the guards, they were then pushed on past the barbed wire and towards the parade ground, where a group of men in striped clothes was waiting for them. These men jumped the newcomers with fists and clubs. Some were actually beaten to death. The men in the striped clothes then asked them questions about their backgrounds and their jobs. And those who said academics or doctors were knocked to the ground. With boots kicking against their heads, their murderers proclaimed that this is the concentration camp Auschwitz, my good man.
I know this is going to be a roller coaster because that infuriates me. That pisses me off. And it wasn't yesterday, right? We're talking a long time ago, but it just pisses me off. Yeah.
His head shaved, Puletsky hurried out of the bathhouse, though a guardsman knocked out 2 of his front teeth because he did not hold the sign with his prison number between them. From now on, Puletsky was neither himself nor Tomasz, but a number, prisoner 4859. In his paper-thin, blue and white striped uniform and a pair of ill-fitting wooden shoes, he found himself once again on the parade ground. There, he encountered the murderous men again. They were called capos, prisoner functionaries. Often German or Polish criminals, they were tasked with, let's say, keeping things in line inside the camp, since the regular SS men lived in barracks outside, right? Most of the capos were violent sadists who enjoyed brutally beating and torturing the helpless prisoners. Wearing yellow armbands with the capo label, they also oversaw the labor companies, to one of which Puletsky was assigned. In that labor company, it became clear that Auschwitz aimed to first exterminate the Polish intelligentsia. Prisoners with academic backgrounds who were not used to demanding physical work or who lacked the experience or the dexterity to work in the quarries were mercilessly beaten to death by the capos. Being too exhausted to lift another brick or to push a wheelbarrow was also a death sentence. Every evening, fewer people returned to the main camp. Every walk to the latrines, every trip to the bathhouse was accompanied by beatings and harassment. Those who came late to morning parade or tried to hide away were hunted down, dragged to the parade ground, and either hanged or shot in front of the others. Many tried to kill themselves, usually early in the morning before the day of torture began. If anyone tried to escape, the whole block was punished for it, standing out in the open for hours or doing punishment sports where men too exhausted to lift their arms fell down and died under the boots of the capos. Often, the only time to catch your breath was when they were busy murdering another prisoner. Puletsky's good physical condition saved him from this fate, but for how long could that last? Well, Puletsky set out to build his first resistance cell, a group of 5 men. Later, he would create other 5er groups, but none of them knew of the existence of the others. So in case they were captured and tortured, they could not betray the whole network, right? Those groups would either organize food or clothing or would help other members to get a job, since it was clear from day one that staying in the worker groups, the labor groups, even well-conditioned men like Puletsky would soon die. So many of those worker prisoners did in fact die that the prisoners had to build the first camp crematorium. Puletsky noted that the camp became one big mill which ground living people to ash. In 1941, as more and more prisoners were brought in, the camp grew. Larger fences were needed, more barbed wire and more guard towers. And as Auschwitz grew, it needed to feed itself. And this opened up jobs for the older prisoners. With careful planning, Puletsky got his 5er groups into the carpenters, the postal service, and the barbers. He eventually got himself a job as a repairman for an oven inside an SS man's house outside the camp. Upon leaving the living hell of Auschwitz, he returned to a world of lavish gardens, laughing children at play, and villagers having normal, everyday conversations with one another. Puletsky felt the questions burning inside him. What was the real world? What was the real nature of man? What was the culture of the 20th century? Since mankind had advanced so far from the barbarism of old, how is this still possible? Or was this the true face of humanity?
I'll back that up a little bit. You know, there aren't words to describe what went on in these camps. There's just not. There's nothing I could say that would either, and justify is not the right word, but to describe it, right? The part that really pisses me off more than anything is the fact that if you take a look at where the world is headed today, where we're now labeling people based on so many different freaking things, you know, whether it's race, gender, orientation, all of these, you know, left versus right, up versus down, all of this stupid crap. It's ultimately going, and we already see it, right? People wanting to exterminate this group. They don't want this group alive, wishing hate on this group, wishing death on this group. It's heading towards the same thing. And it breaks my freaking heart. What these people went through. You know, and we know the stories of how many. To go in there with that mentality and not knowing whether you're going to make it out, but knowing you have to try. Dude's got the biggest set in the world, period. Knowing you're going in now, not knowing how bad, right? I mean, it's not as if he knew what was going on. He had some kind of inkling that it was bad, but going in and realizing what was going on to your fellow countrymen by some of your countrymen, you know, as they said, some of the Polish criminals, being subjected to this and not knowing if you're going to make it out, but then understanding and starting to quickly figure out that, you know, how you could do it. Man. All right, let's keep going.
Possible. Or was this the true face of humanity? Would the whole world look like this if the boundaries of civilization disappeared? Each morning, he and the other prisoners found themselves surprised to be alive. Their bodies thin to the bone, black and blue from the daily beatings, riddled with lice and fleas, living on a starvation diet. Only his daily mantra, "You're not giving up," helped Puletsky keep on and try to inspire others to do the same. Survival was only possible through friendship and mutual help. Loners died quick. Now, up until May 1941, it was possible for ordinary Poles to be released from Auschwitz, mostly by their families paying enormous sums to the Germans. Those released prisoners smuggled Puletsky's notes to the Armia Krajowa, but when the war between Germany and the Soviet Union began, this stopped. Instead, new groups began arriving to the camp. Many were now Jews, and by the end of August, the first Soviet prisoners were transported to Auschwitz. Puletsky reports that one day, 700 officers were tightly packed into a room all day, till finally a group of German soldiers with gas masks on threw gas containers inside. This was the first act of gassing people with hydrogen cyanide at Auschwitz, according to Puletsky. Soon after, though, on his way to work, he passed groups of naked Soviet prisoners waiting to be led into the crematorium, where they were gassed and burned. The capos were often brutal savages, but the bestiality of some of the SS guards was even worse. Puletsky tells of guard dogs trained to go for the throats of prisoners, the torture of smashing testicles with a hammer, and many stories far too nightmarish to tell here. Now with his cells set up in important positions all over the camp. Puletsky was ready to start a revolt, but he needed help from the outside to be successful. The prisoners were thirsty for revenge, and they were ready for anything since they did not fear death after all they had endured. But even had they managed to overwhelm the guards and take the camp, they would not be able to hold it for long. Puletsky believed that the Armia Krajova had received at least one of his messages. He had urged them to stage an attack or send in paratroopers from the Free Polish Army over in Britain or drop a crate of arms onto them or something. But so far, nothing. Without help from the outside, Puletsky's third Christmas in Auschwitz came and went. And Auschwitz was now changing. There was no longer collective punishment, no outright murder, or even everyday brutality, or at least it was toned down. See, Auschwitz became a factory which would now systematically murder its prisoners instead of individualistic random killing. Not with the batons of the capos, but with phenol and gas. There were 3 crematoriums working simultaneously, able to burn corpses within minutes. By April 1943, more and more of the surviving Poles were sent out of Auschwitz to make room for Jewish prisoners from all over Europe and the Soviet Union. This meant the end of Puletsky's network, as its members were sent to other camps. So after 2 years and 7 months of surviving in Auschwitz, Puletsky decided it was time to break out, since an uprising was no longer possible.
Infuriating and heartbreaking. It really freaking is, because the mentality. And this is where, yes, it's history. And that's what I have to keep reminding myself not to get so pissed off about. But the mentality at the time to just be able to do that, I can't fathom, right? We all get angry, right? And we're just like, oh, what if? But then that conscious and that human side kicks in of, I can't do something like that, right? I mean, it's just that, and it's what separates and what makes us human, and being able to separate that good versus bad in those choices, right? We all get angry, and you get that thought of, man, I just really wish you weren't here. And that lasts for like a split second, right? And there's like, okay, just calm down. But they didn't calm down, and they, the smiles, the enjoyment, that irritates the living shit out of me. Of how you could do that to so many people and sleep at night and put your head on a pillow and fall asleep. It utterly boggles my mind and pisses me off. And this is why I'm so glad we're away from this in certain areas. I mean, we know that there's still torture and stuff that goes on in this world that is unspoken. But and to know that for that 2 years and 7 months, I think is what Indy had said, of waiting for something and it not coming, I mean, had to be so heartbreaking. But at the same time, because he did not want to give up, and he truly believed in what he was fighting for, he didn't. And that's kind of the uplifting part of this, is that no matter what situation you're in, if you remind yourself of the positives in your life, of what you have, in his case, it was life itself, you still keep fighting. And that is a story that needs to be told, especially today with the mental health that we see going on in the world of, yes, things can get bad. But when you look at what history has gone through to bring us what we have today, it should keep you fighting for that next day. Don't give up. Don't.
He got a night shift job at a bakery outside the camp. Shortly after Easter, as one guard was asleep, he and 2 other men pushed the door open and ran. Shots cracked out behind them, but they ran all night and all day until they reached a small town. With help from patriotic Poles, Pilecki smuggled himself back to Warsaw, where, on August 23, 1943, after nearly 1,000 days in Auschwitz, he met with commanders of the Armia Krajowa, telling them of his experiences, all the death, all the torture, but people hesitated to believe him. It seemed all too unbelievable, even for the hated Germans to do all this killing. They knew it was bad, but not this bad. Pilecki would stay in the underground army and fight in the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. He was later interned in prisoner of war camps, and after liberation in 1945, was assigned to the Second Corps of the Polish Army in Italy, where he turned in his report about Auschwitz to the British. For Pilecki, Auschwitz was the symbol of the Polish struggle for existence. He himself could never go back to a normal civilian life after experiencing what you've just heard.
No.
He maintained contact with the underground resistance, now against the Soviet Union, after the war, and indeed returned to Poland in late 1945 to report on the Soviet occupation. He lived and worked undercover, but on May the 8th, 1947, the Ministry of Public Security captured him. He was tortured and dragged before a kangaroo court and accused of many things, including espionage and planning an armed uprising. The sentence was death. On May 25th, 1948, in the Mokotów prison in Warsaw, Witold Pilecki was executed. His final resting place remains unknown. In 1990, Pilecki and others from that show trial were rehabilitated, and today he is celebrated, and with good reason, as a Polish patriot and a hero. Now, we cannot even imagine what he went through and what courage it must have taken to do so.
You know, and here comes the emotion. To go what you've gone through, right? And to see what you saw. That's nothing you or I, even with these images, right? And the images are troublesome enough, but to live it, to be there, to breathe it, to see these people that you know, that you work with, could be related to you, just taken from you without thought by these people. How, he left there and fought. Think about the resilience it took. You think about some of the stories that we've told about people, even like Bull, right? Bull Allen, who struggled to live a normal life after that, just after, that war, right? And now you think about it from the sense of some of these and the extreme things that these people saw, and to come out of there and live only to be taken by freaking cowards, and then executed. That breaks my freaking heart. He should be celebrated, right? This is not something to take lightly. This is something that needs to be told. And there's a lot of movies about Auschwitz, obviously, right? And the horror stories that have come out of there. And this is one that needs to be highlighted in the sense as a hope for mankind. And not, and I mean that in the sense of the story behind it, not the exact details, but the story of one man's ability to fight on, regardless of the conditions, knowing what he believed in deep down was the right thing. Regardless of what peril he was put against, he fought and survived. Yes, was the end one that should have happened? No, not at all. That's bullshit. But to survive what he survived, and knowing everything he saw, to be able to walk out of there and still serve, is a testament of strength and just the biggest set of freaking cojones I've ever seen. Yeah, let's keep going.
It's a pretty heavy story, you know?
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I don't know how many people we researched for the Heroes album, but if there ever was a slam dunk, pardon my language, what the fuck moment, this was it, I would say.
And it is, their sacrifice is one thing, bravery is another thing, but doing all of that, I mean, think of the odds. I mean, getting in and getting out.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to Auschwitz on purpose.
And then I'm going to get out on purpose and doing all that for a cause and for what is essentially what is a noble and a just cause any way you slice it.
Yeah, and I mean, I am so surprised also that how isn't there a major Hollywood blockbuster about this?
That makes no sense at all.
Yeah, and people are coming up with, Hollywood scripts. I mean, I'm not bashing the film industry here, don't get me wrong. But
I'll do that for you.
People are making scripts that are less fantastic and not true, and still nobody.
And this is a true story. And even the tragic ending and stuff,
Yeah.
That's,
maybe that's why they're not doing it.
No, they're not doing it because they want to hide history. It's I'll go off on a tangent, but Hollywood is full of shit. Hollywood is full of fakes. There's a reason that people pretend to do their jobs, right? Hollywood is full of bullshit. And people want to be entertained by science fiction. People want to be entertained by false realities, right? People want to avoid the truth of things. And, whether it's a Marvel adventure, and yes, are those entertaining? Don't get me wrong. But still, it avoids everything else. It avoids the past, right? Take a look at the movies that went out and told stories, whether it was Schindler's List, or any of these movies that were based on history. How quickly they have been forgotten in this new age, right? And they don't want to tell these stories to inspire people. They'll pretend to, right? With the sci-fi bullshit. But they don't want to tell the historical truths. And I truly think that's why, as big of a following as Sabaton has, why they're not necessarily a household name, because they tell the truth. I will get extremely fired up on that, and it pisses me off to no end. But people as a whole, and I'm not, don't take this as some conspiracy theory. Just look at the facts of the situation and what is presented to people on a daily basis and who is celebrated versus who isn't. When was the last time you heard a true person of history celebrated that didn't promote divisiveness, right? And fit into a label of they were this or they were that? You don't. Not in the mainstream. It's no longer about that. It's about divide. It's about putting people into labels and boxes just like before. And they're 100% right. They won't. And I'm just as astonished. I'm not astonished. I'm just as upset. And I like Joachim's point of a what the fuck moment, and pardon the language. But he's 100% right. And it pisses me off.
Tragic ending and stuff,
Yeah.
That's
Maybe that's why they're not doing it.
No.
Well, they could throw in a romantic interest or something. They could have Gwyneth Paltrow, maybe. I don't know.
Romance in Auschwitz, great.
Stranger things have happened in Hollywood.
Yes.
Damn it, Joachim.
But that leads you to wonder. I mean, there must have been romantic stories in Auschwitz.
I guess so. I mean, we met a woman called Anna who fought in the Polish resistance during the uprising.
Yeah.
She actually said that, she was flirting with a guy in the middle of, I mean, not as they were shooting, I guess.
Yeah. But that's not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Exactly. So, I mean, she said it's strange how you can normalize such a extreme situation and life still goes on. You still go to the toilet, everybody understands that, but you are still actually falling in love while fighting or waging a war, Yeah. It's weird.
And if this guy could break out, then of course you could break from the men's side to the women's side
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing. I mean, if there's one thing this all proves is nothing is impossible. Nothing is as impossible as you think. I know, but it is. It's, you know what would, even more than just a Hollywood movie, it'd be a good miniseries.
Yes,
You know?
actually. HBO, do you hear this?
See, if anybody out there's HBO is listening, and Yuki and I'll write it. I mean, I'm a writer, and he's good at emotion, so together we could do it.
Yeah, but don't put me in acting in it because I suck as an actor. So.
As we've noticed over these months of Sabaton history, ladies and gentlemen. What about the actual song itself, though? Did you decide on the topic before you wrote the song, or did you have the music sitting around and
Wrote the music with Peter, our producer.
Okay.
The first time we wrote a song together, and him, you know, coming from, you know, Lindemann, Pain, Hypocrisy, those bands, and the harder side of things, it became a bit of a harder and very, very dark song. So as we were writing that song, I realized that this is the song, because obviously, even though it's a very, very, you know, we're singing about a very courageous man, it would not have made sense at all to have a, you know, proud, uplifting song for the subject. You know?
Especially, I wonder what he was like as a person, like personality-wise, because you don't. I mean, from the story, you can see, okay, he's got a lot of dedication. But you meet someone on the street, you don't know if they're a dedicated type person or not. No. So it would be really interesting. Well, that's your homework, guys, to go and put the song on and think of Witold Pilecki.
That's all for today. Thank you very much.
See you next time.
All right, everyone, here's the drill. A lot of you have been supporting us through Patreon, and I'd like to thank you all so much for that. It really helps. That's what makes this channel happen. So click on subscribe. You know the drill, basically. And I just wanted to say thank you all. See you soon.
You know, it is a tough topic, and I'm glad they kind of ended. You know, you could question and say, well, why are you cracking jokes at the end? It is history, right? And as much, I mean, it isn't something that you want to focus on because you will dwell and get lost in it. So I get kind of the jokes at the end and such, is because it is such a heavy topic, and it's an uncomfortable topic. Those images are not easy to look at by any means. But coming out of that is a story of hope, of determination. And my God, the movie that could be made for this would... I don't know that the world could handle it today, if I'm honest. With... I'll say something controversial. But so many people today can't handle this stuff. They can't handle the truth of history. You know, for a lot of us that are older, we get it, right? But there's very few in these next generations that can handle stories like this. And it's not, I don't mean that in the sense that they're not strong-minded. They're definitely strong-minded. It's the fact that the world is completely different. Even for me as a kid, you know, the world was different than what my parents went through, right? The stories my dad and mom have told, and even my grandparents told, paint the world as, you know, in darker times. Today is not as such with the luxuries that we live with. And so bringing out a movie at this time is not something that I think the world could deal with. I think it would be too emotional. I think it would be something that would quickly be shut down and canceled, you know, as a promotion of this or that, and there would be a way to find it canceled. And I think that's a sad truth. I could be wrong, but that's just my personal opinion, right? I will say, you know, as hard as it was to watch this, what kept me from just completely breaking down was that underlying story of the courage, the pardon my language, but just the freaking balls to put yourself in that situation. Again, not knowing whether you're going to make it out. I mean, he knew it was a camp, right? He knew it was a prisoner of war camp. He had no idea what he was about to witness. Nor once he was there did he realize that he was going to be able to get out or not, right? Knowing the next day whether you'd be there. but it's that underlying story of courage and determination that kept me from honestly losing it. He does need to be celebrated. He really, really does, because it a broken record. I know, and I apologize. Man. All right, let me switch it up, give you my final thoughts. You know, it's one of these stories that modern civilization is not ready to hear again. But needs to be reminded of that inspiration, that hope. Not just about these heroes that they put in today, you know, but some of these other heroes that are less spoken about, the Tornies, you know, Poletsky, I think is how they pronounced it, who made it through what they made it through, only to be taken like that, similar to Torny, who was in war, but then, you know, this being a subject of just a pure, as Indy put it, a kangaroo court, and then executed. Yeah. Wow. This is the beauty of Sabaton. I'm going to try to, I'll close this out because we're now at, only 36 minutes. I was expecting to be at like 50. But I will close this out. This actually, I avoided it for the sense of the emotion into it. And thankfully, you know, I really tried to find that underlying message that kept me from truly diving into the emotion of it. Because y'all know how emotional I can get with these songs. But also I'm glad I watched it today, because it does make me thankful, not just of where we are today as a society, but just that there are still stories of hope out there. There are still stories, regardless of the tragic ending, that if you truly believe in something, whether that be yourself or a greater cause, it gives you that courage and that strength to wake up the next day and deal with your ordeal. And that's really what I take from this is, no matter what you are going through, this isn't a pissing contest to say he had it the worst, right? But take it from a sense of, this is a man that watched friends and such just be led away and executed for no reason other than, you know, where they were from, what they stood for, being an educated person of this nationality. We wake up today and we deal with things like money issues. We deal with things like depression, and we deal with all of these things in our lives. But at the end of the day, we still have the ability to fight, no matter what the condition is. And so now there's many more resources out there to deal with situations that you're going through, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's abuse, whatever it is. Use this story as motivation to understand where someone was from, and not knowing what tomorrow would bring. If you're in that same situation, you have the power to come out of it. Use this as inspiration, not as a, wow, that was horrible, the world sucks and I don't want to be here. Use it as motivation to say, he went in and made a change, and so can I. Use that underlying story. That's what the world needs from this, is that underlying story of courage and determination, not just to not repeat the past, but also how do we move forward. That's what helped me keep my emotions in control, because for who said it would crush me like firestorm, yes, it did. I had to truly find that underlying hope from it. I'll end the video there. Y'all know what to do. Like, subscribe, share. For me, I've got a couple more videos to do of some more upbeat songs that I'm going to have to really dig deep for. But it definitely makes this Thanksgiving a little bit more special to truly give thanks to where we are versus where we've been. And for that, I thank each and every one of you. I'm thankful for y'all. I appreciate y'all. Y'all know what to do. Like, subscribe, share, all that. I'm JTMM. I'm out.